the Chancellor, Covenant University, Dr. David Oyedepo, the Vice President Education at Dear Mommy, Pastor Mrs. Faith Oyedepo. This morning it's my privilege as I welcome everyone to C-ICADI 2018. I'd like to specially recognize Her Excellency Mrs. Joyce Banda, who is here with us today. I say welcome, Ma. It's such a privilege to have you. The Chairperson, C-ICADI 2018, Ms. Akintomide, I'd like to also recognize and welcome you. The Olota of Ota Kabiesi, sir, Kibat Akbele, sir. I say welcome you, Kabiesi. Vice Chancellor, sir, Covenant University. Members of Management, Covenant University. Vice Chancellor, Landmark University. Our most eminent lead speakers, we want to thank you for being here. We have an array of lead speakers. It's not at the opening, it's not very usual at the opening of many conferences for virtually all our lead speakers to be here. I'd like to especially recognize you. Participants at the C-ICADI 2018, I say welcome. I welcome us all with great excitement. The protocols have been rolled out, and I would not go through all of them one by one. But all delegates at this conference, the fourth ICADI, happening 2018, with theme, The Challenge of Leadership, Driving Africa's Future, is more strategic in focus. And it actually touches on the nerve center of that which affects Africa, virtually every nation state of Africa. And this particular conference coming right on the heels of the 16th anniversary of Covenant University's Founders Day, which is 21st October 2002, which we marked only yesterday. What this conference is set to do is to interrogate issues of advancement with respect to leadership governance on the African continent, while addressing strategic concerns of vital relevance to Africa's development. Hence the theme that we have. In 2014, right in this hall, looking at the issue and subject matter of conflict and how to manage conflict, the Chancellor, Covenant University, stated that the greatest challenge of Africa in the 21st century is leadership. Today, we are gathered at this opening segment of C-ICADI 2018, and I'd like to say that Covenant University is well poised to be looking at these issues. We'll look at the motto of Covenant University, raising a new generation of leaders in all fields of human learning, and this particular conference would want to look at leadership in all ramifications. One of the reasons C-ICADI 2018 is looking at this particular theme, we do not just want to continue to bemoan the issues, that there are challenges with respect to leadership is not the issue. That has been on for several years now. We must begin to prefer solutions and identify directions and pathway to follow. We want to believe that this conference, which has a Pan-African agenda, particularly working on future casting the Africa that we want, even beyond Vision 2063, will need to look at the exigencies that will propel action. And not just action, but action that will lead to driving a revolution, looking at different operational contexts on the continent. And this is why all our lead speakers are focusing on key areas. We want to also let you know that we have stakeholder-based representation from industry and also representation from different facets of the continent. Petra Kucha presentations will be taking on this platform. And I know that until we begin to take responsibility for our own issues, just noting what Thabo Mbeki said a few years back, that Africans will continue to be subject of compassion and ignominy and contempt until such a time when they become demonstrable masters of their own destiny. And this is what we are talking about, for Africa to begin to address African issues and not looking behind our backs in addressing this. We are also highlighting the fact that in this particular conference, the first female president of Malawi, the second female president of an African country, as already introduced in the person of Mrs. Joyce Banda, is already here. Dr. David Oyedepo, Chancellor of Covenant University, said, "Leadership is not occupying a seat, it is accomplishing outstanding feats. Her Excellency's accomplishments are no mean feats, and we're all looking forward to see the directions that she would be charting." This conference, talking about the C-ICADI series, is the foremost conference in Covenant University, and we have quite a lot of huge expectations. The fate of Africa does not reside outside Africa. It rests within Africa. It rests on the bosom of visionary leadership, credible leadership, leadership that gets results, and leadership that is able to catalyze change, and change that will indeed propel action. And Africa's future will be indeed secured. It is our expectation that C-ICADI 2018 will serve as a catalyst for giving direction and also propelling action. I'd like to welcome you again on behalf of the conference organizing committee, and I ask you to please look forward to a wonderful outing on this conference. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Ma. Please, can we put our hands together once again? I know that Professor Banyon is a language expert. But moments ago, you see, this is why it's important to be at a forum like this. It's my privilege to just do a kind of a small language class and then say that is the Olota of Ota. Kade ope lori, ki bata ope lese, kabiyin o si o. It is my privilege to introduce members of the entourage of the Olota of Ota. We have here Oba Wadudu Deinde, the Akogun Oruba Ota. Oba Akim Oduaro Onikotun Ota. Oba Clement Akinyemi Ajano Ota. High Chief Balogun Idowu Balogun Ota. High Chief Bangboye Oshulabu Ekerin Ota. High Chief Ezekiel Bangboye Aru of Ota. I didn't know I would do so well in pronouncing these names. Put your hands together for me. I didn't know I would do so well. We also have in our midst a galaxy of distinguished guests. And these include a former Vice Chancellor of Crawford University, Professor Samson Ayonlaja, who indeed is a forerunner for one of our key speakers, distinguished Professor Peter Okebukola. We have in our midst Professor Olayonju Adeniyi, Vice Chancellor, Landmark University, our sister university in Omuaran, Kwara State. We have Dr. Kanyesile Litchfield Shabolalo, one of our speakers from APNI FFT, Imtram Dev. We have Dr. Rafim Razei. I'm sorry, please. please pardon me. Pardon me. Mr. Abiodun Fijabi, one of our speakers, Dr. Adebisi Adewole, and of course, Lucia Nlongwane. I believe these are Southern African names. Dr. Akin Oparison of LBS, this Lagos Business School. Our own Professor Jonathan Aremu. You're welcome, sir. Mr. Austin Enim. Sorry, the handwriting. Mr. Austin, you are welcome. Dr. Shola Afolabi. Mr. Demilad Oluwashino. Mr. Femi Taiwo, one of our speakers, and Professor David Esezobel, a representative of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our tradition at Covenant University to open our very big heart and receive with our big arms all of our guests. I am not competent to do that. There's only one person that can do that here, and I'm not asking you to suggest because I know the person. He is our amiable Vice Chancellor, Professor A.A.A. Atayero, to give us a welcome address.
The Chancellor, Chairman, Board of Regents, Covenant University and Landmark University, Dr. David Oyedepo, the Vice President, Education, Living Faith Church Worldwide, Pastor Mrs. Faith Oyedepo, the keynote speaker and our special guest of honor for the day, Our Excellency, Mrs. Joyce Banda, you're most welcome. The chair for the occasion of this day, Ms. Cecilia Akintomide, you are most welcome. Our distinguished keynote speakers, you are most welcome. The Vice Chancellors here present, thank you for gracing this occasion, especially my own dear brother from another mother, the Vice Chancellor of Landmark University, you are most welcome. I cannot start without appreciating the presence of our Royal Highnesses here present, starting with the Olota of Ota. Thank you for gracing this occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this fourth in the series of C-ICADI conferences. Not only to the conference, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to Covenant University, Hebron, the birthplace of kings and queens, and our very serene campus. It is our utmost delight as an institution to welcome everybody that I've welcomed previously, and to state specifically that it is a thing of utmost importance to us because each and every one of them is an expert in his own field when it comes to Africa development issues. Especially at a time like this, when there seems to be an urgent need for a paradigm shift in the leadership culture of our great continent. We all agree with me that the extant culture, which is characterized by in-group collectivism and low performance orientation, has proven to be as unsatisfactory as it is unsustainable. The current Human Development Index of African nations after decades of independence leaves much to be desired. Contrary to the lofty post-independence expectations of all the African nations, today, several of them are still challenged with underdevelopment. This has been fostered by civil wars, undemocratic leadership, as well as weak political, economic, and social institutions. Consequently, both skilled and unskilled young Africans at great risk to their own lives undertake adventures in relocation to Europe and America in search of a better life. Today, African nations are in dire need of a visionary leadership that will steer the African people towards taking full responsibility for the development of the continent. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the premise for the founding of both Covenant University and the C-ICADI conference series. In the founding philosophy of Covenant University, we have a key word there called departure, aimed at evolving a novel higher education system that empowers the students with leadership skills and attributes to change not only the nation, but their world. Our vision at Covenant is to be a leading world-class Christian mission university, raising a new generation of leaders in all fields of human endeavor. We are on a mission to create knowledge, and by so doing, restore the dignity of the black man. It is in furtherance of resolving the leadership question towards eradicating underdevelopment in Africa, in spite of its abundant human and material resources, that the African Leadership Development Center, ALDC, and the Covenant International Conference on African Development Issues, C-ICADI, were established. This international conference was conceived to produce a contributive platform for relevant stakeholders in African development to engage in discourses aimed at propelling desired changes in the leadership orientation in all spheres of life on the continent. It is our expectation that the papers that shall be presented in this conference will go a long way in evolving pragmatic reforms in the political, social, and economic leadership of the continent. Covenant University recently emerged as one of the top 3% universities by the Times Higher Education ranking of world universities. And on this basis, we are committed to collaborative research with national and international development agencies, research bodies, and other higher education institutions in driving the development of Africa. While wishing you all fruitful deliberations, I wish to most specially congratulate the second substantive Vice Chancellor of Covenant University, Professor Ayoze Obaya, who happens to be the chairperson for the local organizing committee, and indeed all the members of the committee who have worked assiduously to see that everything you see today is in good shape. I wish you a very successful conference, and I congratulate him and them all for the splendid organization of this fourth in the series of C-ICADI conferences. Ladies and gentlemen, it is on this note I will most respectfully ask us to please rise. As I invite the Chancellor of Covenant and Landmark Universities, Dr. David Oyedepo, to give his welcome remark and declare the conference open. Chancellor, sir.
Thank you. Please, let's be seated. Let me first welcome us again to this think tank conference. The purpose of this conference was to gather thinkers together who can help think the way forward for Africa. We have been involved in readings and presentations But it's time to sit down and reason together. Readings don't change things. Presentations don't change things. It is reasoning through the things presented, asking questions and seeking to find answers that do. Let me also join the local organizing committee, the Vice Chancellor, to most respectfully honor the first female president of the Republic of Malawi. It's an outstanding feat. For taking time to be here with us, you're welcome. And to also welcome our own Vice President, immediate Vice President, African Development Bank, an 88 nation-owned bank, for accepting to chair ICADI, C-ICADI 2018. Ms. Cecilia Akintobewa. I've had deep thoughts, and I want to open this conference by getting these thoughts across. We have had 3 C-ICADI till date. It's important to reflect on what came out of these and what value has it added. Vital questions on the 4th Covenant International Conference on African Development Issues. I think it's important to start with that. What did we get out of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd C-ICADI? Now, by way of reflection, the 4th C-ICADI had as its theme, rising opportunity for investment in Africa and the prospect of an economic miracle. We went as far as bringing 2 Nobel laureates to help address these issues. I hope something came out of it. The second, titled Biotechnology, ICT, Materials and Renewable Energy, Catalyst for African Development. Great subject. But what did we get out of it? The third, driving inclusive and sustainable development in Africa. Models, methods, and policies. We had the privilege of having the erstwhile former president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, who did great justice to this subject in the opening session. What did we get out of it? Africans are known for great presentations, eloquent presentations, in-depth presentations that has not led to transformation. It's time to think. Growing up as a boy, we used to sing a song in our fellowship. Stop, 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 everybody stop, 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 and think. Stop and see the end of the way you are going. Stop, stop, stop. It's time to stop. Take stock. Think through. What are we pushing for in this current one? The greatest challenge of Africa, which has been eloquently discharged, presented on many platforms. The greatest challenge of Africa, as I lent my voice to it in the 21st century, is leadership. The reason for this center is to address that subject. So it's time to think through. The breakout sessions are not times to while away time. They are times to respond to these pungent questions. Somebody has said everything rises and falls on leadership. I can't agree with him any stronger than himself. I believe every statement of that word. Therefore, a departure from our current state necessitates a change in the quality and caliber of leadership we have across various sectors. What do we expect with respect to outcome for all these efforts? What are we to push? And who are we to push it or push them to? What must make the fourth ICADI, C-ICADI different from other academic conferences? We are not here to celebrate discoveries. We have to see how these discoveries lead to the advancement of our already battered and beaten continent. With almost no respect, how many Committee of Nations, continents? The ADC must take on these questions and adequately address them. How do we push our findings and discussions to where it is needed? Why can't ALDC get into collaborations with AU, for instance, other regional groups in Africa, as a center for leadership research? So we won't start just blowing grammar and clap and walk away and wait for next year. Why can't ALDC seek collaborations with United Nations in matters regarding Africa? Individuals do it. Some of us make presentations on issues that we think are of grave concern to the world as individuals. Why can't this center build up to that level? These are some of my thoughts in our efforts towards rebranding Africa through C-ICADI. Africa needs urgent rebranding. We need urgent rebranding. We don't need a prophet to tell us that. I hosted New York Times to an interview at a time, and one of the impromptu questions they asked is that, "Sir, what do you do with your time?" I said, "I read and I think." It wasn't something that was part of the official questions. I read and I think. There is the need for the rise of thinkers in Africa who can think our way through. They can help think our way through to the next level. The purpose of learning is to enhance our capacity to think. If it doesn't culminate in that, it's a wasted knowledge, which helps to make quality decisions. I once captured an inscription on a billboard in South Africa that read, "Knowledge, the new currency of the world." That's where our problem lies. Somebody also said another definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing the same way and expect a different result. No system can ever outgrow the knowledgeability of its leader. Our problem in this part of the world is not just lack of quality education, but lack of education without integration. Just import something wholesale, land it here, it has no relevance. The knowledge of winter is not relevant in Nigeria. We've never had winter here, except to pretend to have one, and then you clothe yourself. And they say, why? You say, I'm pretending to be in Europe. Education without integration is the greatest problem of education in Africa. Today, we have succeeded in building a world-class university by His grace. Yes, lots were learned from already global universities ahead of us, but nothing was copied. How did you get there? That's where we are going. Find out the principles, see how that applies to where you are. As a churchman, I learned church growth principles and insight from South Korea, but not imported, but dissected, and to see how that applies to the environment where we live. And today, by His grace, we have succeeded to build the largest single church congregation in the world. Direct application without integration will lead to frustration. It's time to translate knowledge to application within the context of where we are. For instance, democracy is a great idea promulgated, among others, to secure the world from the horror and danger of dictatorship and totalitarian leadership. That's the origin. It is built on fundamental assumptions of high-level literacy, which we don't have. That empowers every member of society to own his own ideas and values that determines who or what he or she casts his vote for. That applies directly to high literacy developed nations, not here. And so we have to find a way of integrating this global principle, the only acceptable principle for now, to our context. I've been asked to present a paper, but my idea is it is time to integrate democratic principles into the African context. Otherwise, you wake up tomorrow morning and find a psychiatric patient in power. And find somebody that will just be there but can't perform. So why don't we sit down to define what are the minimum requirements for seeking elective offices? What screening processes should we embark upon to ensure that not just anybody that has nothing to offer has access? The fundamental assumptions upon which democracy is built does not exist in its real terms. Some of them do not exist in its real terms in African context. Also, by reason of assumed high level of literacy, every citizen is expected to subscribe to superior opinion that emanates from debate. That does not exist. Some will never campaign and they must win. That's where we are. Some will never stand an interview and they must win. That's where we are. And so you have leaders who cannot define what's a policy and don't have no idea of what a budget is or how to arrive at it. A poor driver must be leading the one he drives to an accident. We must wake up. The world won't mind watching you destroy yourself Where is the United Nations? Syria is almost gone. Iraq is breathing hard, looking for oxygen. With this high level of company of thinkers, we can get our way through. I've been in quite some conferences, plenty of issues raised, but dies there. Current data shows that literacy in Africa is below 20%, while it stands above 70% in the Western world. The Prime Minister of Ireland was once asked a question, how did your country get out of our economic ruts? And the response, education, education, and more education. We either bail ourselves out, or we are down and out. What a university degree or equivalent does is to expand our capacity to acquire knowledge from every available avenue. This is the reason for my call for a minimum of first degree or equivalent for anyone to be considered for any political office. Yes, we have a number of emerging, highly intelligent people, but surrounded by a mass of ignorant people. And so pushing ideas through becomes a problem. They use political pressure to destroy their creativity. That's why there must be a minimum requirement for anyone to access any functional political office, like in Nigeria, including local government chairmanship, who have all branded themselves as executive chairman. Everything in Nigeria is executive. Now I'm an executive pastor. And there are executive professors here. Executive lead speakers. Everybody is executive. Everybody is executive. Your Excellency, executive governor, executive chairman, executive minister, executive, everybody. That executive means you can't ask me questions. That is how poor we have made ourselves, bereaved of wisdom and knowledge, and seeking for a change of story. May I also submit this by the grace of God? This organization has run for 37 years without crisis. Covenant University has had power running since inception, 24/7. Canaan Land has had power running since 1999 till date, 24/7. Water has never gone off. Our pipes have never run dry. 1999 till date. We can make it happen. All we need is men and women with required capacity to experience a change of story. On this note, welcome, and this conference is hereby declared open in the name of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Thank you all.
Can we please do that some more? Let us have our seats, please. We've just been charged to take charge and to change things. We should take charge and change things. And that it is time for us to depart from rhetoric and then to begin to make practical inputs in what will eventually culminate in the positive change for our African continent. We've also been told that we shouldn't only be celebrating discoveries, but we should see to it that our discoveries, to a large extent, lead us to the redemption of a battered African image, so that we can also be on the same page and on the same flight with the rest of the world. And then finally, let's stop being executive officers let us be practical doers of things that will bring about a much more prosperous Africa. Can we please appreciate the Chancellor and Chairman of Board of Regents of Keynote once again, Dr. David Oyedepo. In the course of the commencement of this particular opening program, we had a number of persons that joined us. Just quickly, let me recognize them. We have here is our Education Secretary of Living Faith Church Worldwide, Pastor Niyi Beecroft. You're welcome, sir. We have one of our lead speakers, and indeed a member of the Board of Regents of Covenant University, Pastor Valentine Obi. You're welcome, sir. At this juncture, it is important for us to take another flight to the next level of this program. And that is having the privilege of listening to the chairman of this conference, 4th C-ICADI, and the person of Mrs. Cecilia Akitomide. But before I bring her here, may I humbly request, Ma, that you please rise and please remain standing while I do a very short profile of you. The person you see standing before us today is Mrs. Cecilia Akitomide, an independent non-executive director of First Bank Nigeria Holdings PLC, one of Africa's largest financial services holding companies, which owns West Africa's oldest commercial bank, First Bank. Until recently, she was Vice President, Secretary General of the African Development Bank, Africa's premier development finance institution. She has served as Chief Counsel, Institutional Affairs, as well as Finance Counsel. Mrs. Akitomide is a member of the Nigerian Bar and the New York Bar, and has practiced law. You can do that. Yes, you can put your hands together. And has practiced law in different jurisdictions, including as a business reorganization associate in the law firm of Whale, Gottschall, and Manges in New York, and as a junior associate at O. Thomas and Company, Lagos. She was a member of the United Nations Election Monitoring Team for the 1994 presidential elections in South Africa, which was won by Madiba, Nelson Mandela. Ms. Akitomide is a recipient of one of the highest honors in the land. She is officer of the Order of the Niger, OON, which she earned in 2014 for her meritorious contributions in the field of international development. Ms. Akitomide serves on the boards of the Ondo State Development and Investment Promotion Agency and the CC Hub Growth Capital. She holds gold and bronze medals in swimming, and she's a deacon. There is always the God factor in any rising profile in the world. She was also a member of the church choir in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. Shortly before I bring her to the podium, let me let you know that she's a progressive, transformational servant leader and a bold reformer. She's passionate about Africa's development, the empowerment of women and girls, and the role of private sector in realizing Africa's development. She's a firm believer that Africa's transformation lies in the people, you and I, and not in the government or the state. distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular honor to bring to the table, to the podium, our chairman, 4th C-ICADI, Mrs. Cecilia Akitomide. Let us please rise as we receive her, and let's put our hands together some more.
Please sit down. Ẹ̀yin bàbá wa, ẹ jókòó sir. It is such a great honor to be here today to talk about a subject that has consistently consumed time, energy, financial resources, and unfortunately, precious lives, the subject of leadership. Thank you very much, sir, for this honor. Thank you very much. Kabiesi, thank you very much. My dear sister, and Your Excellency, Ẹ̀yin bàbá wa, thank you. The subject of leadership, or leadership itself, it defines our progress as a continent and as a nation, and determines our pace as well as the road of travel. Regrettably, leadership is also the defining factor in the stagnation or loss of direction of many countries. It has been said, and Papa, the Chancellor, also mentioned it, that everything rises and falls on leadership. So a nation can rise, be propelled by the force of leadership, and a whole nation can be destroyed and brought down by the same force of leadership. Leadership is a force, whether you believe it or not. It is a force. Leadership is the one thing that can immediately transform a nation, particularly in nations with weak institutions, which is not uncommon on our continent. The slides. And let's take, for example, Ethiopia. Within 6 months, I mean, we've all followed the history of Ethiopia, some even from the time of Queen of Sheba and Haile Selassie, the days of the terrible droughts, the war with Eritrea, a conflict that lasted for about 20 years. And then within 6 months, a 42-year-old president came into power, and he says, I don't need war. It's consuming time, it's consuming resources. The Eritreans are even our cousins, or you can even say my sibling from another mother. And the borders are closed. And I need a port like crazy. And Eritrea has the coastal waters and the port. So what am I doing? Wasting resources that I am trying so hard to build, fighting a war with Eritrea. So he thought it through, and within 6 months, 20-year hostilities came to an end. Detainees who had been in prison because they were considered to be dangerous he released them. Ethiopia is still standing. He swore in a cabinet that is 50% female. Now, we all know every time you say, you need to bring in women, they'll say, we can't find a capable woman. He found them very quickly. And he... Can someone do it? Thank you. So he found the women without a problem. And he has a cabinet that's 50% female. And one of the women is actually the Minister for Defense. I visited Ethiopia some time back, and I had a conversation with one of the ministers. They had gone through a rapid development. And I said to that minister, I said, we just need to open up the economy. And I went on my private sector spiel. Well, that minister had known me all through my career. So he was very nice to me. So he let me speak. And then he's like, Cecilia, not our ethos in this country. We believe in the state managing, owning, and we will develop at the pace of the state. Now, in 6 months, the story has changed. And that economy that had refused to open up now is the same economy that the president, the new prime minister says, I am willing and thinking seriously of opening up this economy. So, leadership, 6 months, a whole nation has changed. And that gentleman is referred to as the most watched leader at this time. That is the most watched leader in 6 months. I usually would not say anything negative about a head of state. However, I couldn't resist this example because it's a nation that's very close to everybody's heart. We have followed that nation for a long time. South Africa. I was reading articles, and you see, the South Africans, I love how thorough they are. You can actually get graphs that will show you the performance of the economy under each head of state. It is public information. You will see economic performance, GDP. You would also see exchange rate, everything public information. And I couldn't help but notice what happened during the time of President Zuma. There were some successes, but from an ethical perspective, it was a period where you went from different scandals. And some of those scandals, the president was in the middle of it. And it started having an impact on confidence, investor confidence. And what was interesting is that not only was foreign direct investments dwindling, you actually saw South Africans themselves, their investments outside of South Africa increasing significantly during the same period. And that was the signal. The South Africans themselves signaled to the world that we do not have confidence in our system. They've started investing outside. That is a result of leadership, One man, a whole nation. Now, in my view, if we fix the problem of leadership, we would have solved a good part of our development problems in Africa. Working in development, I've seen conflict, droughts, different challenges that we have faced on the continent of Africa, war, pandemics. But in all honesty, after so many years in development, you know, we're usually not allowed to say it, but since I'm now outside of the bank, the critical problem is leadership. It is not about the policies. You have to fix leadership. If you fix leadership, everything starts to function. So let me refer to a quote by Lee Kuan Yew, who is one of the most widely quoted leaders. This is the master reformer of Singapore. And he said that however good the system of government, bad leaders will bring harm to their people. No matter how many institutions you have, no matter how much you have in the reserves, if you have a bad leader, you will harm the people of that nation. He also says that several societies are well governed in spite of poor systems of government because good, strong leaders were in charge. And then he says that there have been other nations, other systems that were good systems, but totally destroyed because of a bad leader. Now, there are other examples that show the impact of a leader on the economy. And this can be found in China with Deng Xiaoping, South Korea with Park Chung-hee, and Botswana, an African country, with Seretse Khama and Ketumile Masire. Now, China is one that I would like to mention because the Chinese miracle happened in our lifetime. 1980, China was one of the poorest countries on earth. Fast forward, 2018, the story changed. What is interesting is that the Chinese leadership, the Chinese miracle was by decision. The leadership sat down. The leadership had a vision. The leadership said, we do not want our country to be this way. We want a modern China that would be a leading economy in the world. Leadership, decision, discipline, implementation, and we see the results today, in our lifetime. So whatever nation it is, or whatever group of people, or even whatever organization, you can have a transformation. But it's not about the people, it's not about staff, it's about leadership. Fix leadership first, everything falls into place. Papa always says, seek ye first the kingdom, and then all the other things. While we are seeking the kingdom, fix leadership also. Fix the leadership in your nation, fix the leadership in your company, fix the leadership in your community, and we'll see things change. So what is leadership? clearly we've seen that it's one of these concepts that you cannot miss it when it is present. But when it is absent or when it is abused, the impact, the results are unmistakable and they are far-reaching. Leadership has singularly defined Africa's history and the pace and trajectory of its development and its people. One of the definitions of leadership that I like is one by Hersey and Blanchard, who define leadership as the process of influencing the activities of an individual or group in efforts towards a goal or a given situation. Now, a lot of times we mistake leadership with an office. An office will never make a person a leader. That's just the title they have. They have to have been formed, not born. You are not born a leader either. You are made, you're groomed, you are formed to become a leader. So we should not mix titles and offices that people hold and say because of that they're a leader. They may have authority, but they may not be because as a leader, you should be able to do two things. You can move people. You can influence people. You can galvanize them into action towards a common goal. And if you can't do that, if you cannot communicate, you've missed it. That's like the basic. If you can't communicate with your team or with your people, then you need another job. Now, leadership is relational as well as situational. So it's relational. If you have a leader, there has to be a follower. So if you're a leader, you have to check your back all the time. Are they still with me? If you've lost them, it's over. So it is relational. It is also situational because you are leading in a given environment. You're leading in a given situation. And this is why what Papa said about just importing knowledge and expecting it to work, I really believe in that. You can't just import it. So you can't import a leader from elsewhere. I was at a meeting and someone said, oh, we just want to kidnap President Kagame and bring him to their country. It was interesting. We all laughed. But President Kagame has mastered Rwanda. He is functioning in a situation and in a context that he knows. He knows the people, he knows the neighbors, he knows he has a vision and he's applying it. If you move him to another situation, he would have to try to master. And what worked in Rwanda may actually not work in that other place. So leadership is situational. If you do not know your context, if you do not know the environment, if your vision of where you're leading people to is not clear to them and to you, you need another job. So, as we discuss leadership today and in the next 3 days, it's important that we look at it from that situational perspective. What is my environment? What is the leadership for where I am, not what is happening in the UK or in the US, and then you want to bring it to Nigeria or bring it to Africa. What obtains for Africa? Also, as we discuss leadership, it struck me, we've been focusing on the leader. If you don't have followers, you can't have a leader. And if you're not a good follower, you will not have a good leader. And so it struck me that there are two critical things. The act of leading, when you're trying to groom leaders, but you also need to groom followers, because followers need to be able to follow well, and following well including raising red flags and saying, no, this is not what I agreed to, what I voted for, or performance is not working. And part of it is also taking the decision not to follow any longer. And it's important that as we groom leaders, as we prepare people for leadership, also prepare them or prepare their followers to be able to say no. And that is so critical. I lived in Tunisia through the period of the Arab Spring. And as a development expert, everyone kept on asking us, but you saw this coming. Why couldn't you do something? And I think all of us at the African Development Bank, Tunisia was one of our best clients. Ability to execute was Tunisia and Morocco. They agree something with you, by the evening, execution has started. But there were deep issues that they were not dealing with. And in trying to be good and not poke your nose into political issues, maybe we let things go that we should not have let go. But the sad thing was that it took leadership in a different way. Someone saying no, but sacrificing his life to say no. To say, you know what, I'll rather die than live in this country. And that was what sparked the Arab Spring. And Tunisia still hasn't recovered today, neither has Egypt. Do we need to get to that point? No, we do not. So, what is our context in Africa? What is our, Africa's, and I think we all know this, home of 1.29 billion people, 16.64% of the world population, second fastest growing continent. We have some of the largest mineral deposits, but we have the world's largest number of poor people. So, wealth, at the same time, greatest paradox, unbelievable poverty. While preparing for this conference, I realized that when poverty is extreme and in high levels, that system of governance is broken. And if you're trying to run a democracy, your democracy is broken because a significant number of your electorate, they are hungry. They can only deal with immediate issues. They can't think long term. Poverty blurs your vision. Poverty makes you, it's not even 24 hours. It is now. Everything is now. You can't strategize. And so in some countries where they talk about stomach infrastructure, yes. I mean, the man is hungry. He did not eat yesterday. When we talk about insecurity, yes, if he doesn't steal, he's not going to eat. And some of you look like you have enough to share. So he decides to relieve you of what you have. We complain, the system is corrupt. The army, they harass you. They want bribe. The police, they harass you. When was the last time you went to an army barracks or police barracks? And these are the keepers of our society, but we make them live like animals. So when they come out, they behave like what you have turned them into, and then you complain. What is also interesting, there's a slide on Lake Chad. You know, we've been talking, you can never make excuses for terrorism, for bribery, for all of those things. But you can see it coming. You know that with certain policies, certain things will certainly happen. So this is Lake Chad, the way God made it. To my left, and to my right, dried up, is Lake Chad today. And we think there will not be conflict. The people who live around Lake Chad, of course there will be conflict. And there will continue to be conflict until it is fixed. All of those countries, those numbers is how much water they withdraw from Lake Chad. And then now there's no water. Lake Chad has shrunk by 90%. It so happens that that area is where we have Boko Haram. If you have lost your means of livelihood, you will find another means of livelihood. If the government or your leaders don't fix the situation, then you will fix it looking for survival and terrorizing those who were supposed to fix it. So, what is interesting about all of our challenges on the continent is that our challenges, we saw them coming. I don't think there's anything that has happened that actually has been a surprise. So it was really about policies, having scenarios and saying, if I go A, then B is sure to happen. And if I don't want B, then act, take a decision. So India, I'll take India and Nigeria. India was poverty capital of the world. And India, everywhere the Indians went, they were at every meeting when it comes to technology. They were leading in education, leading in business, but they had that label, poverty capital of the world. So the Indians sat down and said, you know what, we can fix it. Took the right policies, implemented the right policies, and then they sent the label to Nigeria. And Nigeria has the label. What is interesting about that label is that before the label stuck on Nigeria, people saw it coming, and they were saying, at the rate Nigeria is going, by X date, it will become the poverty capital of the world. And we heard it, but we really didn't do much about it. And so it came, it came, and as a sure thing, we are the poverty capital of the world. But what is interesting is that we saw it coming. In Yoruba, we say, Igi gogoro ma gumi loju, atokere lati nwo. I mean, you saw it coming. You have knowledge. You have capacity. So why didn't you do anything about it? Predictions, projections are not unshakable or unchangeable facts or truths. It's just, if you're going this way, this is what will happen. We are letting you know so you can change direction. But the stupidity of it is to have the information and do nothing with it. So today, we have a broad range of leaders to choose from. In the past, our leaders, it was all about you're in government or about a civil rights movement. It was all about we want independence, we want self-determination. So our leaders had a certain profile, looked a certain part. Today, our leaders have changed. You find them in the church. They build universities. They change the narrative. If they can't change it nationally, they change it within their own system. And they show that, hey, we can do things differently. You find them in private sector. In the past, without a government contract, you couldn't be successful. So you had to either be a civil servant or be a government contractor. And then out comes young people, they come up with something called paga. His idea. And you know what? He's selling that idea and it is spreading beyond Nigeria. You have in East Africa, M-Pesa. You know, the government of Kenya approached the folks of Safaricom and wanted to leverage their infrastructure that they have used for M-Pesa. So, you know, in the past we say what government has created is a public good for all of us. So government approached private sector that what you have created, let's make it a public good. They said no. It was interesting. They told the government, no, we built it. It was our idea, our thoughts. We're not giving it to you. If you want to use it, you will pay for it. It's a service. Now that, I mean, when you think of Africa that we know, to stand up to your government and say, this thing belongs to me. You want part of it, you pay me like everybody else. That is leadership, whether you agree with them or not. So the profiles of our leaders are changing. We're now having, I mean, when you look at Nigeria's telecommunication system, it's a lesson. I think Nigerians contacted, you know, all of the telecommunications companies everywhere in the world to come and bid for the license, and they all just said, Nigeria, no. So the South Africans came, says, no, well, you know, one jungle is the same jungle. We can function here. We know our terrain, and we know it well. And in 6 months, they broke even. Until today, and that's why, you know, foreign companies are trying to get into that space. But only the African companies are owning that space. Those are the new leaders. Not necessarily Procter & Gamble or Unilever or even Coca-Cola. It's African-grown indigenous, multinational companies. Those are the new leaders. You know, in the past, if you were a billionaire, you kept it quiet. Now, if you're a billionaire, you publicize it because you are proud and you're ready to transparently show how you made your money. And those are the new leaders. You know, I was reading about Jim Ovia. There was a time there was no Zenith Bank. And for Ladiola, GTB, okay, I'm with First Bank, and for Ladiola, GTB, and these are Nigerians. Or you go to Cote d'Ivoire, and there's a gentleman called Diagu. He started with an insurance company. From insurance, he's gone into banking. From Cote d'Ivoire, he's covering all of Francophone Africa, and now has an insurance company in Nigeria. Those are the new leaders. They didn't need any foreign help. And they're the ones telling the stories to the young Africans that are coming. You have my brother Valentine, he's very humble, but that's a leader. He's done what nobody else could think about. Before fintech was fintech that we are now all talking about, he went and created it. Those are the new leaders. Now, the last thing I would like to mention, you know, I talked about followers being able to say, no, I will not follow you. And that in itself is leadership. And I do want us to think about it. Now, in certain countries, you may not be able to influence who wins an election. Certain systems are so rigged that it will take divine intervention. And when that divine intervention comes, we may not like it, but it will come. So, until then, I now thought about it. You can hold a government accountable. And I saw that the South Africans have actually been doing it. In South Africa, they've been making their government sign compact agreements. So there's the constitution, fine. There's your development plan, fine. But you know what? We, the citizens, we want to sign an agreement with you. And they measure progress on the basis of that agreement. So it's a system that we need to start thinking about in other African countries. With civil society, with the academia, this is a small thing for academia. We know what the challenges are. We know what the plan should look like. Then you develop the scorecard. Whether the government likes it or not, you come up with a scorecard. How long did it take to put together a cabinet? How long did it take to fix the roads? How long did it take to adopt a budget? What is the government wage bill? What percentage is legislature? What percentage is the population? And let's look at the allocations. Does this make sense? We should start thinking that way because we can control that. There are certain things we can't control, but we can create a scorecard. And even if the government does not agree with the contents of the scorecard, if it makes sense and you go public with it, it will stick. I mean, a lot of us know about budget. And budget started, but now it's so effective on allocation of resources. So these are just a few thoughts I wanted to share. I know I have gone way above time. My apologies. And I'm looking forward to the next 3 days. I'm looking forward to the new ideas. But most importantly, let us not make this a talk shop. Because we know what the problems are. Let's make this a solutions-oriented gathering that we can actually walk away from here and implement and start executing. And some of us will come together and work together, even start working with some of the students to implement some of the ideas that will come from this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, ma'am. Can we please put hands together once again for our conference chair, Mrs. Akitomide? You would agree with me that it has been a very insightful and inspiring session. I believe we're all inspired, and we all are awake to our responsibilities as Africans. We are talking about how to tie the loose ends. We know there are so many loose ends on this continent, but how to tie those loose ends and then to see to it that we make the continent have a leapfrog. It is important to understand the fact that the topic was particularly, the remark was particularly centered around securing Africa's future. And there are several things that we can take away from this, but there are two that actually resonate. And this will be putting our leadership in the African context, that is, following the situational leadership paradigm. And then, while we make some very useful and interesting comparisons with the other parts of the world, we must understand that there are certain comparative natural advantages and comparative natural disadvantages. And so everything must be contextualized so that we'll not try to be more Europe than Europe, and then we'll get it wrong. And then, of course, taking Africa out of the poverty cycle. Why? Because when we are within the poverty cycle, we become very susceptible. Of course, you can remember what happened in Ekiti State and Osun State in the elections that you and I were witnesses to, vote buying and vote selling. It was more of the case of the highest bidder. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have learned from these particular remarks is that, indeed, Africans have had themselves put in a fix. There's a structural problem that is already created by the leadership, quote and unquote, of the continent to see to it that they can always put the people of Africa in a vulnerable position so that they can always be manipulated for their own personal goals. I mean, the political class taking undue advantage of the poverty situation created by the leadership of Africa. Don't you think that we should appreciate the conference chair once again? Before I identify and, of course, invite someone very important to perform the next assignment, it is important for us to note that we have some other very important persons here. They've been here all through. One of them is our own very dear third substantive Vice Chancellor of Covenant University, Professor Charles Korede Ayo. You're welcome, sir. On this note, ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to invite the Vice Chancellor, Professor A.A. Atayoro, to perform the next assignment. Let us appreciate him. Can we put our hands together one more time, please?
If indeed you have enjoyed that very interesting delivery by the chair of C-ICADI, please give her another wonderful round of applause. Thank you. It's one thing to teach from the books. It's another thing to teach experientially. The Bible says the things our hands have touched, the things we have handled, those things we share with you. We have leaders and we have leading leaders. It is my privilege to call the Chancellor and Chairman Board of Regents, Covenant University, Dr. David Oyedepo, to come and speak to us on the topic, Driving Africa's Future. Ladies and gentlemen, there will be a slight shift. The Chancellor will come and give a speech after Her Excellency has made a presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to a convenient point to invite the second female president ever on the continent of Africa. Before I do the introduction, let me quickly begin to alert some persons that this particular session is a special one. After the presentation by our keynote speaker, Dr. Joyce Banda, we shall be having a panel discussion. The panelists, please be on standby. The panelists know themselves. Very shortly, I will be calling out the names of the panelists. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. We have the following persons that will be discussing on this panel. Dr. Adewale, Dr. Afolabi Monisoye, Mr. Femi Taiwo, Dr. Adebukola Oyewumi, and Mr. John Oyewale. Incidentally, that panel shall be moderated by the Master of Events, Professor Sherif Folari. So while that has been, that has gone out, it is on this note that and it's a special privilege indeed, that I introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Joyce Banda. Your Excellencies, Ma, I will request you very humbly to please rise and remain standing while I present your profile. Thank you, Ma. Let us put our hands together. Dr. Joyce Banda is an entrepreneur par excellence, activist, politician, and philanthropist. She was also the President of the Republic of Rwanda from 2012 to 2014. Malawi, please. Malawi. I'm sorry, Malawi. Please pardon me. I wouldn't know why Rwanda came to my lips. I don't know. She was Malawi's first female president and Africa's second, as earlier said. She's a champion for the rights of women, children, the disabled, and other marginalized groups. Before becoming president of Malawi, Dr. Banda served as a member of parliament, Minister of Gender and Child Welfare, and Foreign Minister and Vice President of that republic. A recipient of more than 15 international accolades, including the Hunger Project Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger, shared with President Joaquim Chissano of Mozambique in 1997. President Banda is a strong advocate for women and girls' emancipation and empowerment, and a prominent civil rights campaigner. She founded the Joyce Banda Foundation International, which guides projects that range from empowering women to providing for orphans of education. On the international scene, President Banda was instrumental in the formation of such organizations as the African Federation of Women Entrepreneurs, AFWE, currently running in 41 countries in Africa, the Council for the Economic Empowerment of Women in Africa, CEEWA, and the American and African Business Women's Alliance, AABWA, of which she served as first president. President Joyce Banda recently joined the Center for Global Development as a distinguished visiting fellow and is currently a visiting fellow at the Wilson Center in the United States. She's a board member of several developmental organizations, including the Executive Advisory Committee of UNIFEM, the Global Leaders Council for Reproductive Health, and the Scientific Advisory Board for the Program in Global Health and Social Change at Harvard Medical School, United States. Distinguished guests, the Chancellor, sir, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the keynote speech, which is titled "The Challenge of Leadership, Driving Africa's Future," is to be presented by no other person than our amiable, very distinguished, first female president of Malawi, and indeed the second female president of the African continent. It is my honor to invite to the podium Her Excellency, Professor Joyce Banda of the Republic of Malawi. Please let us rise as we receive the keynote speaker. And let's put our hands together while we appreciate, for those of us who are feminists and who believe in women empowerment, let us appreciate this woman of substance that is an inspiration to women and indeed the entire African continent. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Dr. Oyedepo, the Chancellor of you may be seated. The Chancellor of the Covenant University, and Professor A.A. Ataero, Vice Chancellor of Covenant University, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the keynote speech was already presented by my sister Cecilia. Just get prepared to listen to stories of a grandmother. It is my honor and privilege to deliver a keynote address during this fourth series of the Covenant International Conference on African Development Issues here at Covenant University. I'm made to understand that the Covenant Conference aims to address strategic concerns of vital relevance to Africa's development while interrogating issues of advancement, leadership, and governance on the African continent. I'm proud to be associated with the Covenant University, a private university, one of Africa's leading universities, founded on a Christian mission ethos, and is committed to pioneering excellence at the cutting edge of learning. I have noted that the university is driven by the compelling vision of raising a new generation of leaders for the African continent on the platform of a holistic, human development-centered and integrated learning curriculum with a visionary quest for raising total men and women who will go out to develop their world. Furthermore, I also understand that the African Leadership Development Center, a center in Covenant University, is the host platform for this conference. The center is an initiative and brainchild of the Chancellor, with a vision to raise a new generation leaders via leadership development and the nurturing of transformational leaders for the nation states of Africa and the world at large. The center is endowed by the David Oyedepo Foundation, headed by Dr. Oyedepo himself. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have been on this street before. I came in 2015 for the opening of the Obasanjo Presidential Library. And we got here, and we were stuck in the traffic. And I asked, what is going on? They said there's a special place here. And they started to explain about our Chancellor and all he had achieved here, and what the Lord has done at this place. And I said, I wish it was during the day. I could have attended the service. But then, yesterday, coming here, I also just missed service. So I need to come back. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I say this because I'm one who believes that the ability to lead a nation, like I have been privileged to do, requires wisdom. You need to be educated, yes. You need all the degrees, yes. But you need wisdom as well. And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, wisdom comes from God. Of great interest is to note that the center provides integrated and holistic leadership development programs for leaders, professionals, and youth, cutting across diverse fields and contexts, equipping and training them with leadership, entrepreneurial, social, political, and economic skills for demonstrable impact in leadership and governance. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to speak on the theme of this year's conference, which is the challenge of leadership driving Africa's future. The objectives of this conference series resonate very well with my life story. As most of you may be aware, I've spent my entire adult life promoting and supporting women and girls, particularly those in disadvantaged households. This is why I'm excited to be here to speak on today's topic. Furthermore, I have spent the last 2 years as Distinguished Fellow at Woodrow Wilson Center in the United States of America, where I was researching on African women's participation in political leadership. The paper I wrote and the toolkit that I developed as a result of that paper can be found on the Woodrow Wilson Center website. The issues I discussed in that research paper are very relevant to the topic of today. While conducting this research, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I came across this scientific fact that leaders, whether male or female, are born with 30% leadership traits, and society and our environment must add up the remaining 70% in order that they become the leaders they were meant to become. While still in the US, I decided to do more research on this scientific finding. I wanted to make a case, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that if indeed it is true that leaders are born with 30% leadership traits, what are the chances of this African girl child born in a typical rural household, locked up in abject poverty, but brilliant and born a leader, with the 30% leadership traits, acquiring the 70% that she requires to become the leader she was meant to be. I therefore approached the Center for Global Development to do more research on this scientific finding. The African Girl Child research generated a lot of attention and interest, so much so that I was encouraged and funded to write a book titled From Day One, and it can be found on the Center for Global Development website, and it is free. And I'm focusing on the African girl child from the age of 0 to 10. My research has established that indeed leaders are born with 30% leadership traits, and 70% is developed through life, throughout the person's life. Therefore, the challenge we all have is to analyze what happens to our lives to ensure that the best is realized out of the 70%. And more importantly, in Africa, where children face daunting challenges, these challenges have rendered many people unable to realize their leadership potential because the 70% which society must shape and motivate is unavailable. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, the 20th century was a difficult one for Africa. Although independence from colonial rule in the 1950s and 60s brought with it the hope and enthusiasm, this political independence did not necessarily correspond with the economic independence. Too often, Africa failed to harness the talent of the people and the wealth of her countries. However, in the past 2 decades, a significantly different picture of Africa has begun to emerge. In 2010, McKinsey, a renowned management consultant firm, described African countries as lions on the move. McKinsey's view of Africa was validated in 2013 as the World Bank commented that Africa could be on the verge of economic takeoff, much like China and India were 20 years ago. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in addition to political reforms, the combined effects of economic and financial reforms have added to the positive outlook of the continent. Experts predict that the continent's combined consumer spending will grow to about 1.4 trillion United States dollars in 2020. They also estimate that Africa has as many middle-class households as India. The key driver to Africa's success has been its natural wealth, where Africa prides in contributing to about 30% of the world's mineral reserves, including about 40% of the world's gold reserves. The exciting news is that the natural resources wealth explains just a part of the story. What I have observed is that Africa's economy is becoming increasingly diversified in the following key sectors: the financial sector, health and pharmaceuticals, infrastructure, energy, construction, information, and communications technology. I understand that foreign direct investment on the continent increased from 10 billion in 2000 to almost 60 billion in 2009. This can only bear testimony that returns on investment in Africa are among some of the highest in the world. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Africa has decided to change the internal structure of our economy by improving business climate and macroeconomic policies which have spurred the broader domestic economies of many African countries. In Africa, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, 26 out of 32 least developed countries had liberal or relatively liberal regimes governing the repatriation of dividends and capital. Therefore, since 1990, profit levels of foreign companies in Africa had averaged 29%. Since 1991, These levels have exceeded all other regions of the world. More positively, however, a number of African states managed impressive economic growth rates of over 4% since 1990. In addition, infrastructure and technology are moving fast, connecting the African countries to each other and the world at an unprecedented level. There have been more than 316 million mobile phone users in Africa since 2000. Mobile phone usage has increased by 20% a year for the last 5 years, opening up access to banking and other financial services. For example, rural farmers that previously wouldn't have used banks can now access financial products through their mobile phones. In terms of human development, Africa has also made tremendous progress. For example, 10 times more people now have access to AIDS treatment. Maternal mortality and infant mortality rates are dropping across most of Africa. Diseases are being combated. For example, measles deaths in Africa fell by 89% between 2000 and 2007 after a massive vaccination program. These investments in human capital provide the required labor environment that is needed for industry. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, furthermore, during the past decade, we have seen many fora being established in engaging the continent: the European Union Africa Union Forum, the China-Africa Cooperation, the Africa-India Forum, the US-AU Relations, and the Corporate Council on Africa. During this 21st century, we have witnessed an increased inflow and competition of the global players in Africa. This clearly shows that Africa stands ready to interact with the rest of the world for its growth. Having said this, I want us not to lose sight of the challenges the continent still faces. These challenges present an opportunity for modernization, trade, and investment on the continent. As you may be aware, here in Africa, most countries are least urbanized, with 60 to 85% of the population living in rural areas and deriving their livelihoods from agriculture. Much of the countryside is deeply rural, in that it is still characterized by poor rural road networks and poor physical, economic, and social infrastructure. Most of our countries in Africa are characterized by the fact the fast urbanization growth rates estimated at around 6% per year. Africa therefore needs innovative strategies and programs to spur economic growth and generate enough jobs for its growing youthful population to address challenges of urbanization, among other things Africa needs. What we need to do is as follows. One, modernize our agriculture sector. This will require the development of rural economy to generate agricultural growth and job creation. I wish to quote a renowned scholar, a product of Africa, the late Professor Callistus Juma, who said, and I quote, "Agriculture and the economy for Africa are one and the same. It is the responsibility of an African president to modernize the economy, and that means essentially starting with the modernization of agriculture. The development of agriculture will require advances in science and technology, commercialization and promotion of regional markets, crop diversification, agricultural processing, and value addition. Engagement of new crop of entrepreneurial leaders dedicated to the continent's agricultural improvement. Africa must improve infrastructure while ensuring food security and sustainable use of natural resources. This will mean introducing policies and institutional changes necessary to promote agricultural innovation by incorporating research, development skills, and capacity from academia, private industry, NGOs, and government in order to develop local knowledge and resources, increase agricultural output, and create markets. Number two, Africa also needs to leverage its people resources. It is projected that Africa will have over 1 billion people in the working age group by 2040. However, there are many school dropouts at primary, tertiary, and university levels who cannot secure employment nor engage in gainful self-employment. The situation creates enormous social pressure on governments and unrest among the youth because they are left idle. There is therefore need for governments to establish and strengthen training in vocational skills, business management, industrial development, and investment, and create loan facilities for the trained youth to create jobs for themselves and also to be able to employ others. Number three, African governments need to focus on education and training of its young people. We should match the skills the young graduates are being trained in and the job requirements. Number four, Africa needs to intensify its efforts in regional integration and intra-Africa trade to enhance and expand trade and investment between and among African countries. Number five, Africa needs equal partnership from foreign investors. We need partnerships that add value rather than extract it. Number six, we need to continue to accelerate transfer of technology as an essential part of achieving Africa's development. Technology will help develop centers of excellence in business, in health, in education, in agri-processing and tourism. Number seven, political will to drive political economic governance. Africa needs political will to create an environment for macro stability. Most governments in Africa today aim at establishing open, competitive, and dynamic economic structures that can mobilize individual initiatives and dynamic private enterprise. This needs to be encouraged. And number eight, Africa will need to expand and grow private investment. Africa needs capital investment for its economic growth and development. This capital must be cheap and long-term, one that is affordable and not exploitative. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, having highlighted the hope and opportunity for Africa, I will allocate more time of my presentation to African women's participation in leadership on the continent of Africa. More than half of the continent's population are women and youth. Therefore, if there has been an impact on modernizing, uplifting Africa, we need to pay attention to women and youth. Many parts of Africa, girls aged 0 to 10 are discriminated against when it comes to accessing education, especially when they are living in poverty. In many cases, they fall victim of harmful cultural practices. Facing these challenges, girls are less likely to develop the 70% traits that I talked about. It is therefore my hope that decision makers will therefore implement policies and build programs that support, protect, and promote the girl child. It is my sincere hope that our African governments will put more focus and investment in educating girls if we have to create a critical mass of women leaders in the future. Women have already held positions of political leadership in the Kingdom of Ethiopia in the past, during the Meroitic period. And one queen, referred to as Candace of Meroe, is said to have prevented Alexander the Great from expanding further south beyond Egypt in his conquests. I deliberately say this so that you can maybe, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, appreciate that we are not asking for something out of the blues. Women of Africa have been leaders before, even before colonization. However, as Africa opened up to trade with outside groups, colonization and warfare changed African socio-economic and political norms with gendered consequences. The intersection of gender and colonization in Africa, particularly how colonization impacted on women's political participation, is understudied. While it is unlikely that patriarchy was an unfamiliar concept in pre-colonial era, the introduction of European systems of governance rapidly institutionalized it into new governance structures in many parts of Africa. After the defeat of local systems of government, the formation of new ones largely failed to acknowledge the critical political and economic role of African women. The impact of colonization on African women varied, though women's pre-colonial political activity was generally disregarded. It was the men, especially opinion leaders, who were consulted by Europeans in the establishment of customary law. As such, women in Africa were institutionally subordinated to men and largely stripped of political and economic autonomy they had previously enjoyed. In the waves of rising demands for independence in African countries after World War II and beyond, female political leaders emerged in the struggles, claiming a portion of their African heritage. We have women like Rose Chiwambo of Malawi, Graça Machel of Mozambique, Winnie Mandela, Bettina Sisulu, Joyce Munjuru of Zimbabwe, and many others who were instrumental in the fight for autonomy from colonial rule and influence in Africa. Indeed, Africa should celebrate the success of her women's political leadership on the continent. As Africans, we can be proud of successes that our women have had, because this history of women being freedom fighters, warriors, and queens, we have been able to achieve great results compared to other parts of the world. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in spite of these successes, many women have failed to realize their full potential, to follow their destiny and calling because of issues of poverty, underdevelopment, underrepresentation, and inequality, among others. As we know, women constitute the majority of this world. And the last time I checked, they also brought the other half into this world. I wish, therefore, to state that despite there being progress for women moving into decision-making positions, as witnessed by the rise of women at all levels of society, including becoming heads of state and government, women still face various challenges on their journeys to public office. Without painting a gloomy picture, allow me to cite some of the challenges that women face, so that together we, men and women of Africa, can concentrate on building a critical mass of both men and women leaders to transform Africa. Women have limited access to formal education. Women lack economic empowerment, as most of our countries don't have affirmative action, therefore have to compete on equal ground with their male counterparts. Therefore, economic empowerment is very key to promote women participation in political leadership. For example, in Malawi, in 1989, I started an organization called the National Association of Business Women. And because of women being economically empowered, 4 of us in that organization ended up in parliament and ended up serving as ministers of women and children, and in my case, all the way to State House. The third one is patriarchal society. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, examples are numerous on the continent and beyond about what women are going through because of patriarchy. But it is not only Africa, Thailand, Australia have stories that we can learn from. Physical abuse. During most of our elections, we are finding that women are being abused. In one country last year, women were actually beaten and stripped naked. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, number 4 is lack of role models. Number 5 is lack of training, fake news, and negative media coverage. Lack of training, people will say, but the international community has been coming to Africa all these years to provide training for women seeking to stand for elected office. But I have always argued that most of the training that we receive is not appropriate. While in my village I cannot go to my chief here and look him in the face and point fingers at him, this training encourages us to be assertive and to do that. It is the best way of losing an election. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, therefore Africa needs their own training designed by African women and men, suitable for African women seeking for elected office. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, women and girls are main victims of extreme poverty in the world today. They make up 70% of people trying to survive on less than $1 a day. They are the first victims when there is an economic crisis. Too many women are unaccounted for, underutilized, and overexploited. But history has shown us that when women contribute more, the economy does better. The IMF research on this subject has shown that eliminating gender gaps in economic participation can lead to big gains in economic per capita. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, however, the tragedy is that if this trend continues, I fear that we will divert from the path that we were on towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular achieving gender equality. All members of the United Nations agreed and signed this agenda in 2015. It was my hope that in partnership with the developed world, Africa would achieve gender equality by 2030. It is evident that if we ignore women, who constitute more than half of the population, our world's development will be stunted. There's an obvious moral case for investing in women, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we are members of a society predicated upon the values of equality and justice for all. But we live in the real world, and we want to see returns on our investment. According to research done at the Columbia University, there's a strong correlation between countries with females participating in leadership and a rise in GDP, 6.9% to be precise. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, despite these statistics, evidence has shown that women get the chance to lead. They lead differently from men. This is because women are more risk takers, they feel and connect with the plight of basic livelihood. Women leaders are brave, and when problems arise, they do not cover up or look away. They are more persuasive, assertive, and willing to take risks. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have always said, I've been asked all over the world, what do you feel about feminism? And I have always said, Africa will have its own type of feminism. We are not going to confront or fight our men. We are going to engage them and work together with them. And in my case, that's how I have achieved gender equality. So as we reflect on challenges of leadership today in driving Africa's future, it is important to reflect what Libe Satan of Yahoo Incorporation had to say. And I quote, "So much what it takes to be a leader has been historically defined by others. And while I was determined to be a leader, the last thing in the world I was going to do was to try to be like a man so that I could be taken seriously. I had to continue to be myself and create a leadership style that worked for me. I'm just not capable of being anyone other than who I am." In my personal case, in the 90s, a journalist from South Africa came to interview me, and he asked, "Are you working so hard, so aggressively, so that you get to the top and be as powerful as a man?" And my response was, "No, I'm working so hard so that I can get to the top and be a powerful woman." Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have to be alert that we are not going to copy feminist styles of other continents. A lady in America who unfortunately happens to be Nigerian asked me in a meeting in Washington, D.C., to say, what is it that we are going to do? Those of us that are women that have prospered. I went back home and a woman told me, When I told them, let's stand up, let's fight, let's argue, let's confront this man, it's our time. They said, no, they chickened away. Mrs. Banda, what is your take on this? I said, well, the last time I checked, our feminism in Africa is working better than America. Because in Africa we have had 4 female presidents. And in Africa, the country with the highest number of women in cabinet, in parliament, is on the continent of Africa. And African presidents are doing well in appointing our women into positions of leadership. If we fight with them, that will never happen. So we are winning. So if you want to copy America, go ahead and copy America. But from what I know, America is still trying to get a woman into State House 200 years later after their democracy. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude by saying that it's too long. Allow me to say that to make you feel proud of what we have been able to achieve. I recall that when I was head of state in 2013, we were supposed to recruit a new executive director for SADC. Dr. Salamao was retiring. And I asked the executive director and their board to say, do whatever you can to see if you can find a woman for the first time to occupy that position. So they went out and looked for a lady qualified by the name of Dr. Tax of Tanzania. And being chair of SADC, I hosted the SADC summit of that year, 2013. So our statute at SADC says the new executive director shall take oath at a heads of state summit. So with my 16 brothers who are male presidents, supporting me, sitting at the podium, I called upon Dr. Tax to come to the podium, and it requires that she should be sworn in by a Chief Justice. And in Malawi, I had just appointed a female Chief Justice. So Dr. Anastasia Sosa came to the podium. So here was a female president, a new executive director that was female, and a Chief Justice to swear her in who was also female. But the statute also requires that the chair of the African Union shall observe the swearing in. And Madam Kosaza Nazuma was heading the African Union. And my brother sat there watching 4 women conduct matters of our continent. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our brothers have helped us, have supported us. All we need to do is to take advantage of the opportunity we have to increase our numbers. As you may already be aware, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my mission in life has been to support women and youth gain social and political empowerment through business and education. I'm a self-made leader, and I'm privileged to have lived most of the challenges highlighted in this paper. As a result of that, I have pushed these things from a personal experience, from an emotional point of view, and from a practical perspective. I have moved from where I was not so sure myself of my next meal to State House. On this journey, I have continued to say that leadership is about falling in love with the people that you serve and the people falling in love with you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's a love affair. I truly believe in servant leadership. The grain of leadership in men or women alike will need nurturing to come to full maturity. For many women, their grain of leadership has withered away too early, too soon, as a result of the challenges cited earlier. It is a tragedy that many women have not realized their full leadership potential. It is also important to realize that we can only progress in this campaign if men and women work together. On my journey, as a Malawian woman who is deeply conscious of the history and struggles of Malawian women and girls, as an African woman who knows the challenges, I'm winding up. It's okay. In fact, 5 minutes is all I need. African women and girls, as a global human rights activist, who has championed for the plight of marginalized women and girls and the advancement of women, and as a former head of state who has campaigned for the Malawian people, the African people, and those of the world, I know that we need to take a holistic approach in dealing with issues of women's political leadership. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, allow me to say that what Africa needs are honest, accountable, and inclusive leaders. What Africa needs are leaders that are brave to fight corruption. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have been told by our distinguished speaker before me that almost $70 billion is leaving Africa. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is leaving Africa to go where? Because it is not going to Africa. Therefore, fighting corruption must be global. The West and Africa must work together hand in hand. We don't want to hear the West calling us corrupt governments of Africa when they are also perpetrators. They are enabling, they are enablers. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I've been a head of state, and I get into America, and I buy 5 houses, and they don't ask me where I got that money from. They are enabling me to steal. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we need to also identify leaders. They are champions right now. There's President Buhari, there's President Kenyatta, there's President Magufuli that have stood up and said, no, stop corruption. What they need is to be encouraged, to be motivated. And the global world, our international partners, must encourage when they identify a leader who is sticking his neck out to fight corruption. I said this because it's not easy. And I said this because I've been there. When you start fighting them, they are strong, they have money, they'll fight you back. They'll smear that back onto you. You need to do several things to be able to win. In my case, if you Google me, you will think I was the biggest fool. Thief. But what I did, thank God, I conducted a forensic audit funded by the British government. So there's a document online that clears me. So if anybody said, if you arrest me, I'll say you are the one who sent me. I say, yeah, mention my name, but you are going to jail. You are going to jail without fail. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that the globe, when leaders steal money, they take it overseas. The money that is leaving Africa is going overseas. My request, and I wanted this to go on record, is what when we ask for it to come back, it must come back. We don't have to beg, because it's money that we want to repossess, because it has been stolen from us. I say that, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our boys, there's a contradiction. I want to leave this with you. Our boys are dying crossing the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, looking for greener pastures. But all planes are full of people from the West and East coming into Africa looking for our wealth. Something has gone seriously wrong. Either our priorities are not right, but we want to make sure that we find ways of our boys, young men, staying in Africa. We leaders realizing that the natural resources of our nations are not for our pockets, are for the people that we serve. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as a grandmother, allow me to finish by saying, when there's a bus that is carrying 72 people, and the driver is driving it, and ends up into a ditch, and people die, what we as Africans will do is to ask, what was the driver doing? Was he drunk? Was he dozing? So when my friends blame me, to say, why do you always talk about us as Africans? No, we are sitting on the driver's seat. If the bus ends up into the ditch, we have to answer for it. May God bless you. Oh, and may God bless our Chancellor.
Let's do it some more, please. Please sit down. I heard a lot of things, quite a lot of things. What I heard more loudly was that we should stop practicing Western feminism or European feminism. You're not here, so? Because when the excellency started, everyone was like, I could see the faces of the feminists amongst us brightening up. That yes, that is it, that is it. When it got to the point of, look, let us ensure that there is situational feminism. And I saw that there was a casting of faces down. I hope we heard very well. Our feminism should be African feminism. Let's do it well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard a very, very insightful message. And indeed, we are inspired, particularly for those of us who are feminists, we are inspired. And so we will give another round of applause to Her Excellency, Dr. Joyce Banda. There's a slight modification in the program. The panel discussion will be for later. It will be put on hold for now. However, members of that panel have been put on notice. So you should be on standby. I remain the chairman or moderator of that panel. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'd like to say that I am really very pleased to invite once again my Vice Chancellor to perform the next assignment, Professor AAA Atayero.
Thank you very much, Mr. MC. Ladies and gentlemen, I started by saying there are leaders and there are leading leaders. We have somebody in our midst today, our own Chancellor. I can say unequivocally that majority of us on the high table today are products of his leadership style. Majority of us in the house today are products of his leadership style. So much so that during the 15th inaugural lecture of Covenant University, a suggestion was put forth by the lecturer of the day, Professor Haizi Obaya, that maybe we should start studying the Oyedekporian leadership style. What do you think? I think we should. Some people you need to call up, you have to say a lot of things. Other people you need to call up, just mentioning their names will suffice. Shall we rise as I most respectfully call to the podium to deliver his speech, the Chancellor of Covenant and Landmark Universities, the Chairman Board of Regents of both universities, the Presiding Bishop of Living Faith Church Worldwide, my own personal mentor, Dr. David Oyedepo. Chancellor, sir.
I think we are set for eruption of knowledge. And that has begun since the chairperson spoke, and followed by Her Excellency, former President of Malawi. We should also be aware of the danger of constipation. Amen. I want to believe that some things have gone in and we need some time to digest. The important thing here is to go with questions that must be answered. and be active at the panelist session where they're exploring the things already said. Two major things have gone on this morning. And with the permission of the local organizing committee, my idea at this time is to welcome His Royal Highness, His Royal Majesty, the Olotof to give his goodwill message why this session will shut down, and then you will convey after some digestive moment. Is that okay? Thank you.
Please be seated. Thank you. The Chancellor and Chairman, Board of Regents, Dr. David Oyedepo. The Vice President, Education, Living Faith Church Worldwide, Pastor Mrs. Faith Oyedepo. The keynote speaker and special guest of honor, Her Excellency, Mrs. Joyce Banda, former President of the Republic of Malawi. The Vice Chancellor, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, the Acting Registrar, the Conference Chair, and former Vice President, African Development Bank, Mrs. Cecilia Akintomide. Other distinguished speakers. On behalf of the people of Ota, I want to thank Covenant University for organizing this conference on leadership. This is coming at a time when we have leadership deficit in Africa. And what is leadership? For me, leadership is about management. But when you look at the African society, you find out that leadership deficit has transformed our society into an environment that is hostile to we Africans ourselves. And we could see this with Africans trying to cross Mediterranean Sea without fear for their life. Is either they get drawn or they survive and escape to Europe. That has a lot to say about our leaders in Africa. Particularly our politicians. We have that political leadership deficit. When leadership is not about force, service is not about serving people by force. Political leadership is a call to service. Our youth, nowadays when you look at them, or when you ask them questions about leadership, leadership is about getting rich. And that shouldn't be. Leadership is about serving humanity. It's about creating decency in the society. Look at our immediate environment. Traffic, gridlock all the time because of bad roads, deficit in infrastructures, nothing about planning. But a good leader must have vision, and that is one of the things that is missing in our leadership style in Africa. Again, I want to bring you back home. Of recent, Covenant University, I think, is less than 20 years old. And today is ranked number 1, not only in Nigeria, but in West Africa. That tells you a lot about leadership. Well, it is not overstatement, or it is not because I'm here. If the Chancellor were to be a politician, I will vote for him because I know he will transform Nigeria. Because, no, I once taught at this university, and I was in Europe for a while. I taught at University of East London. I taught at University of Lincoln. I'm back home here. For a while, I taught here, and I felt there is that leadership. You can see it visibly. It is visible everywhere. Even when you walk across the campus, you see the pictures of leaders. Ben Carlson, the former Secretary General Kofi Annan. These are the things that our youth, the students, these are the things they see. And these are the people that they will look up to. And these are the people that will motivate them to perform in life. Hardly do you go to other campuses in Africa. Hardly do you see these things. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the organizers of this conference. And so that at the end of the day, I want you to look at the area of political leadership in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. This is Africa, and in Africa we honor our kings. That applause was not it at all. Thank you very much. Please let us take our seats. At this point, we shall be shutting down this session, this opening session, and then we return just after a few things that will be done here. We return, and then we have the other sessions and other presentations. So at this point, I'd like to invite the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Akan Williams, to give the vote of thanks just to end this opening session. We are still here. I will communicate to you very shortly. The Deputy Vice Chancellor, sir.
The Chancellor, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the success at this opening ceremony is an indication of what God is yet to do for us at this conference. And so we want to return the glory to God, the founder, and the runner of Covenant University. We want to especially appreciate the Chancellor for his leadership and for his obedience to the divine mandate that has brought about this platform, the Covenant platform. We want to deeply appreciate Her Excellency, the former President of the Republic of Malawi, Mrs. Joyce Banda. The keynote address has brought the tonic, has set the tone for this 4th C-ICADI 2018. We want to especially thank this daughter of Africa, Ms. Cecilia Akintomide. Indeed, the narrative you brought on board this morning has given us another thought-provoking insight into the things that we need to do even in this country. The Orator of Atakavesi, we want to appreciate you deeply. As you have said, you've been part of this Covenant project, and we are trusting God that God will yet increase you as you reign in Ota. The management, the staff, all the students, our kings and queens, our invited guests, everyone that is part of this conference, for making time to be here, we want to appreciate you. And we are trusting God that that God that brought you here shall yet take you to your various destinations in the name of Jesus. Gentlemen of the praise, we appreciate you. Thank you one. Thank you all.
And thank you too, sir, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Akan William. It's a convenient point for us to have a group photograph, and I will be asking very humbly members of the high table to come to this side of the auditorium for a group photograph. And that will go into the annals of Covenant University at the opening ceremony. On standby. Just you? I was expecting paparazzi. Thank you very much. That you are doing the needful. Thank you, please. Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's jam our hands together some more. Thank you very much. While pleasantries have been exchanged, we appreciate our Chancellor, our Kabiesi and his entourage. We appreciate our guest, Her Excellency, the keynote speaker, former President of Malawi, Dr. Joyce Banda. Thank you very much. We appreciate all members of management. Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's jam our hands together some more. Yes, jam our hands together some more. Thank you very much. We can please we appreciate sit down. Chancellor. We are reconvening immediately. Please let us remain where we are at the moment. The Chancellor and the guests are just at the foyer. Please let us remain for now where we are. Please. We are reconvening almost immediately. Please and please, thank you.